Hello again, and welcome to our parish round table, I guess it would be, although it's a kind of square or rectangular table with Sister Therese, Deacon John, and Father Mario. And again, if you, in the course of our recording now, streaming, have any question, please send it in. Father Mario will pick it up right away, and we'll do the best we can to answer it. Well, as you can see by the green covering of our table, we are now in what is known as ordinary or regular time, but I think in real life it's not very ordinary or very regular. But I do want to begin, first of all, something I mentioned in our announcements, to thank all of you who in any way did help our mega raffle be successful. We sold all of the 700 tickets, and we had the raffle this past Friday evening, and if you won, you were already called by telephone to announce that you won. If you did not get a phone call, better luck next year. It means that you haven't won. So that would be certainly something that I'm thankful for. We are, of course, concerned at this time. Last night, rather, let me interrupt that we had our first Saturday outdoor Mass, and again, thankfully, it was very sunny but a bit cool. We only started last year to do these Saturday evening Masses in June because I felt that the June weather is always kind of iffy, and it's proved to be that, but nevertheless, it was kind of well attended by the usual who come, and I do say that this outdoor Mass is one that you are welcome to come to. We do encourage you and do ask you to wear, of course, the mask and bring your own chair. And the spaces are marked out so that we do keep the appropriate 6 foot distance. I know we're becoming, I suspect many of us, aggravated with all of this. Well, why do we have to wear masks? Why do we have to keep this distance? But we are also aware, for those of you who still watch the news, and now I hear some of you don't watch the news anymore because you don't want to be upset, but the news is telling us that places that were a little quick to say, oh, let's socialize again, are now seeing another bump of the illness. And it's not, I think, people say, well, they're testing more. That's true, but that's not what's really the criteria for noticing what's happening. It's how many people are coming back into the hospital. And where they were beginning to say, well, we don't need all these beds, are not so sure now that they are not going to be needed. So a great deal of patience, of course, is required, and that, I think, is difficult for most of us, but it is important. Now, if for any reason you decide to come to Mass, we will begin next Sunday to have the regular schedule. The 4:30 and the 10 o'clock Mass will continue to be streamed, so please know at this point the so-called obligation for Mass is not in place. So whatever, there is an obligation for us, as I mentioned, to pray, to keep God in our lives, but not necessarily to have to be here for Mass. But if you decide to come, please remember that we are going to ask you to sit in specific places, unlike some of you I know who have very special places that each week you go to, may not be able to do that, okay? And you will be asked to wear a mask during Mass. I know that's an irritant, but it's important to keep all of those and all of us as safe as we can. There will be no missalettes, so you know. Hopefully we may give you the prayer sheet so that you can kind of pray along. So you are welcome, but please keep in mind that if we have an overload, if all 2,000 of you come to Mass next week at the 10 o'clock Mass, we probably will have to send some of you home. But no, I'm not taking reservations. I know some parishes I hear are taking reservations. I take reservations only for weddings and other, anyway, okay, so no, but just, common sense. So I do want to, announce that. We will do the very best we can. The outdoor mass at 7 will continue, and we'll see what happens at the 8 and 12 again, beginning next week. All things considered, okay? Again, as Sister reminds me, you never know from day to day what's going to change or what's not going to change. I'm supposed to remind you, Father Mario, I guess, was going to do this, that today, although it is the feast of the most precious body and blood of Jesus, it is also in our country Flag Day, and all of you know the story of Betsy Ross, and if you do, here's an opportunity to tell your grandchildren about it, and if you don't, you should know that story of how the first flag was made. I did also want to make a couple of announcements about our school. As you know, the school year is winding down throughout the district. This coming Friday will be the graduation service, graduations for kindergarten, pre-K, and they will have a little ceremony on Friday morning. This will not be streamed, but just that you know that it's happening. And then, not this week, but next week, Wednesday will be the graduation for our 8th graders. There are 18 young people who will be graduating this year, and we hope to have the graduation mass here in church because we will be able to space things out. As you know, the current rule for, and going back to a point I was mentioning before, about how many people you can have is 25% of your seating capacity. Now, that is difficult, and maybe it'll go up, maybe we'll be able to have more people, even though capacity is limited. If it goes to 50%, well, then that will kind of determine how we're going to do things. So all of this is stuff that I'm sure you're aware of, but just a kind of reminder, do the very best we can. I know that some of you are going to have fellow parishioners in other parishes will tell you all stories of how wonderful things are going. Well, that's good, and things are not as bad as they make it out to be. I think some people make this as the worst of times. Well, it is interesting times. The Chinese warned you not to live in interesting times, but there's an old adage, you probably have heard that. But certainly we are also reminded, and I hope that maybe as you dialogue with your friends and neighbors over these days about the protests that are taking place, and there's a lot of downsides to it, particularly the unfortunateness that people are destroying the property of others, and that is never, never to be supported or justified, no matter whatever reasons you may have for destroying the property that belongs to somebody else, who are often innocent victims in all of this. But the basic issue, I think is important for us to consider and to reflect on. The fact that differences are continually being made. Right now, the issue is because of the color of one's skin. And certainly we need to address what hurts are continually being made because of that. Unfortunately, another issue that is emerging in our country, one would thought that it had died out, is what we would call anti-Semitism, that the reaction against sisters and brothers who are of another religious faith. And that's important for us because we are inheritors of that tradition as Christians. So how can we together address issues of injustice where it occurs? And so I just bring that up as something that maybe to continue to reflect on. Well, I've talked more than my time space. Sister has some real reporting to do, so I'll turn it over to her.
Well, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the phone calls that are being made throughout the parish. We are finding many interesting things out from this process. One of them is that a great number of our parishioners do not have email, do not have access to the computer or Facebook or anything. They really don't know what's going on at St. Mary's, even though we try our best in situations like this to share the news. So I think we can only depend upon our parishioners who have neighbors, who have parents maybe who are parishioners, or any way that you can get the word out, even what Father said about starting Mass for those who are able to come and wish to come, but many people don't even know that. So a big finding is that people do not have access to electronic communication, and so we do need your help and your support in getting this information out. And that would be a big thing. But you know, Father, as you spoke about racism and anti-Semitism and things going on that we are so aware of, I'm thinking about this Corpus Christi feast. And I'm thinking about how when I was young, many years ago, we were taught that kind of God is watching from afar, watching us from a distance, and the only way to get really near to Jesus is to receive communion. And yet I hear you saying something very different in your talk about the Eucharist. I hear you saying that Jesus is everywhere, and that's kind of not the way we were brought up. We were brought up, we got to come to church to find him. How did that change?
Well, there's a bit of a history for that. Perhaps going back to, as I mentioned in our reflections about the scripture readings back this past Thursday, but devotion to the Jesus in the Eucharist really turned out to be a development in the 13th century. And up to that point, there hadn't been a lot of real discussion. They kind of reflected that Jesus was present with us. He had promised that in the Last Supper that there are many dwelling places in my Father's kingdom, and his sense of dwelling is, once I am risen, I will find ways to dwell with you, and that presence of Jesus is first really brought into our life at the time of our baptism, when we become a part of a member of Jesus' community, and that we are called, remember, to be priests, prophets, and kings with Jesus, who is with us. So, see, once this, what we call the Eucharistic crisis, developed in the 13th century, and it developed because a Christian thinker, perhaps he didn't realize what he was doing, but began to separate when we gathered at the table to share the bread and break the cup, that really this was only a spiritual reality. And once he used a new word, spiritual reality, suggested that there wasn't a real bodily reality or physical reality. And so what we had to do to respond to that was to say, wait a minute, no, there's a very real bodily presence of Jesus also, as well as the spiritual. And one of the popes at the time turned this issue over to, for his time, one of the greatest thinkers, and he remains one of the greatest thinkers in our Catholic and Christian tradition, Thomas of Aquinas. And Thomas now began to explore how the reality of Jesus is really present, and so new words appeared. No one ever used the word real presence up to that point. Now it was going to be used. So you see, there was, in some ways, what this tended to do is to create a distance. That somehow Jesus was there, but not here, and that's the short part of this. God and is always with us. God is always present with us in different ways. Some of those, the Franciscan tradition particularly, went on to point out that we could discover a real presence of God by looking at the created world, to see flowers and trees. Not that God is in it, we're not talking about that, but that somehow creation reflected the Creator, that the beauty and the multiplicity of creation's wonder was the work of a God who was always with us. In the centuries that developed, I want to say in the 1700s, 18th century, developed a way of thinking of God which said, God is in his heavens and all is well with the world. So that way of thinking, which by the way affected the leaders of our nation when they formed the great principles under which we are governed, they were good, and they are certainly good, but this sense of God is up there and now he's saying, you guys take care of things, I'm kind of watching, but now there's a certain truth to there, but unfortunately that way of thinking distanced God. And that may be part of the answer to this too, that it had to do with the philosophies of intellectualism and skepticism and scientism and all of that that became very popular, particularly in France, England, Spain, and of course it infiltrated to our own country later on. That's one of the ways in which this sense of distancing God began to happen. And many still think of that way. In that sense, God is watching. And I do kid you a little bit that Bette Midler in a song said, God is watching from a distance. Well, she only picks up this whole sense of how things, and he may be watching from a distance, but he's also, or he or she, keep in mind how our vocabulary is speaking about God, takes place, is present with us. Now, that's a long, short answer to your question, sister.
I just maybe pose a question because so many people are saying, I'm missing receiving communion. And God is not at a distance. You don't have to come. He is with us. He's with us in a very, very real way. Okay, I'm going to tell you one funny story. So I've been making some of the phone calls to some of our parishioners. Been very grateful and very gracious in their responses, finding out a lot about what's going on in their situations. But one man was so funny. I won't use his name because it's public, but he was so funny. He says, how's Father Paul doing? I said, he's doing great. He's doing well. And he says, sister, I got to tell you something. He reminds me of Jack Benny. I says, what, Jack Benny? He says, yeah, sister, watch his hand motions. Watch the way he walks. Watch his humor. He said, I can't look at Father Paul and not think of Jack Benny. So, of course, Father Paul said, forever 30.
Thanks, sister.
Some of the people are going to have to look up who Jack Benny is, though.
Right.
Google. Hey, wait a minute.
Google Jack Benny. Anyway, lots of humor is going on, too. So thank you to the people who are calling and following up. And if we can't get a hold of you, we write you a letter. We are persistent in trying to find you and find out where you are. So please respond if you can, because we will find you. We will find you eventually. I do want to speak about confirmation. Is there anything that
No.
Just briefly about confirmation. This week, probably on Wednesday, we will have the first live streamed, and actually it's probably going to be taped for you. But Joe Kugler and I will come on email or whatever, however we're going to come to you. Jen will figure that out, and Father Mario. But we will be speaking to you about the first step in the confirmation preparation process. And so that will begin this week for those of you who are sophomores in high school or beyond and have finished your sophomore year in a Catholic high school or faith formation program. And it doesn't matter how old you are. You can be any age. We will begin the process of preparation for confirmation this week. So stay in tune. Deacon John, Father Mario, anything that...
Something you wanted to start with? Well, I have actually two things. One is sort of a commercial. As you know, we're having our Chevettas chicken barbecue dinners for 4th of July. There are so many people, like I said before, that walk past my house. So I think you now know who I am. There's a stand out there with the flyers. So please pick one up, and I know a lot of our parishioners live around me. And don't worry about the little dog that barks. He just thinks he's a Great Dane, so don't worry about him. And the second thing is, yesterday's Mass was fantastic. There were people, and it was nice to see people again. The hard part was still the social distancing after. We wish we can all get together and be with one another and sit around and talk after, but that's not possible yet. So please come to the outside Mass. It's the safest Mass you can probably come to, but we got to keep that social distancing and make sure you wave because we can't get close to everyone.
You know, I did run into one parishioner who said that he would love to come to the 10 o'clock Mass because it's probably so crowded, I'll probably never make it in. Just to let you know, again, we're not, use your, as Father always says, use your common sense and be careful. But if you do choose to come, if you want to come, there is plenty of room. Very few parishioners right now are feeling comfortable, so don't worry about spacing. Right now, there is space at the inside Masses as well.
I know that there are a number of things that people missed, but what they did not miss at the 7 o'clock Mass last evening is something that has been missing even in our streaming Masses, a collection. We took up a collection yesterday. That's the first time since the middle of March. Now, I know many of you have been mailing it in, and I do appreciate that. And for those of you who have, again, I've mentioned this before, mention it again, appreciate it. You have really helped us keep the things going here at St. Mary's, not simply the streaming of the Masses, but the other things that ordinarily just go on, as you know, in running a household. So we do thank you about that. But if for any reason you are still piling up your envelopes, waiting for the opportune time, as Father Mario will agree, now's the time to mail them in or send them in to help us out. So thanks for that.
You're right, Father, because no collection, no church. So, we're just literally thinking about it. And our services here in the church is still going on. We tried our best to provide the best that we can. And then just like the real presence of Christ when we talk about, we still celebrate. And through the celebration of the Eucharist, we gathered as one, maybe not physically, but spiritually. Well, Father Paul used that term, spiritually. Like in the Mass, we describe the sacraments as the visible sign of the invisible grace. So we cannot really see Christ physically in the bread, but as Father Paul is saying, the real presence of Jesus is there, body, soul, and divinity. So we may not see it physically. Just like, for example, the movements of Christ is really active, and it's not passive. Just like, for example, we're doing live streaming, the cameras are moving. We cannot see who really moved it, but someone is there in the camera moving it along. So just like God is like that. We keep on moving because we really recognize the real presence of God. And we truly believe that God dwells in each one of us. And the only way that we can truly tell that God is dwelling in us is by keeping moving. So don't let the situation hold us or keep us apart. So we just keep on moving and continue to recognize God's presence. And this is why also our church, we tried our best to reach you out through live streaming Masses and through the help of other people who are generous enough to share their time and talents in our church. We are truly grateful for them. And Father Paul mentioned also today that today is a flag day. Someone asked me, by the way, why flag is at half? Is it like supposedly?
Mass.
Yeah.
Well, Deacon John can answer that.
The diocese, as well as most of the United States, is keeping their flags at half staff because of all the deaths from the coronavirus.
Okay.
And people are dying.
And also, I believe, in tribute to those who are kind of putting their life on the line
Yes,
to
first
help
responders.
the victims, the nurses, caregivers, etc. So it's in
That's
honor
correct.
of them too, yeah.
So you got your answer. That's someone who asked about that question. And someone also asked if we have flag in the Philippines. And, and I said, yes, we do. You can see it now in the screen, our Philippine flag. It's the blue. It represents, here we go. Represents the sky, the color of the sky. It means also our hope, our future prosperity, through progress. So it's a symbol of, we can also Google it to make it quick because since we don't have time. So there is a sun, the 3 stars, and the white underneath. So that's our Philippine flag. And of course, we also have a country. Philippines is a country. So, but it is made of archipelago. In other words, we are thousands of islands. So people think that I live somewhere in the jungle. They ask me, which jungle do you belong? Well, I have to make it clear. Yeah, we have a lot of jungle, but I live in a small island of Bohol. Maybe you can also, whatever you want to describe it, but one of the islands in the Philippines. So, yeah, so Philippines also celebrating, we celebrated our 122nd Independence Day, and that was June 12th.
And who was that independence from?
From the Spaniards. I'm not really good with the history. I did not listen to my Philippine history class. But our Philippine independence was, we got our Philippine independence June 12, 1898. Do you want to share more about
Well,
history?
you know who took over after that? The United States. You became a territory of
That's right. So, and U.S. helped us a lot also to have our freedom in the Philippines. And this is why July 4th, it's our Philippine independence in here. July 4th in the Philippines is American-Philippine Friendship Day. So there's a flag that crosses the Philippine flag and the U.S. flag. It signifies our friendship. So we're friends. So yeah, one last word also about racism. Someone also asked me about the reason and asked me about what's the real problem. Father Paul mentioned about it. But for me, someone said to me, it's because we want to be great than anyone else. So once we think that we are great, and if there's no humility in us, for me that's the real racism. I don't know. I mean, it's not about the color. It's not about where these people came from, but it is about recognizing that all of us are human beings created in the same image and likeness of God.
And speaking of that, our unity as human beings, in addition to the parish needing funds to keep itself going, we are planning for July, and we'll give you more information as time goes on, but we are planning a food drive in July because we know that among us there are people who are going hungry. And so as a parish, we kind of thought it might be good for us to, we have been keeping in touch and have been sending out food, but our resources are very low right now. And so we'll tell you more about this food drive that we plan to sponsor in July.
And for those who have no ticket yet for Sharitas, it's still available. You can buy it in the rectory. Buy one, buy as much as you can. You can give it to your friends, whatever you want. So it's all available, and we're still selling on it and have fun. Maybe they can also use the pavilion if you want. Maybe you can arrange chairs out there. Yeah.
Have a neighborhood party on the
That's
4th
right.
of July. You cook all the chickens, just don't tell them where you got them. Make it look like you cooked them.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you all. You can see that we're training Father Mario well to be a pastor because he knows how to go about the pitches for keeping things going. Once again, thank you for being with us, and we hope you have a good week.